Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me speak tonight. Actually, emotional intelligence is actually one of the things I'm really passionate about. So I'm glad I get a chance to share it with everyone tonight. Let me share the screen here. Just a thumbs up. Are you able to see my screen? All right, we're good to go. All right, so emotional intelligence. It's not a new concept. It's been around a long time. The study of emotional intelligence is you can do a whole year's course on it and get very in depth. So my goal tonight is hopefully to spur you on to kind of look deeper into it and just kind of look at some of the tools that we'll be taking a look at this evening. Most of the studies have found that the more emotionally intelligent you are, it just affects everything in your life in a tremendous way for the positive, right? So you find highly emotional people, intelligent people have great relationships. They do better at work. They have better relationships with their family. And so, it's one of these things that, coming more increasingly into the workplace. So why do we look at it here tonight? And the reason why I think it's so critical here is that emotional intelligence, first of all, we all have it, right? And so we all have some form of emotional intelligence. My understanding and the way I see it is the more emotional intelligent you are, as you increase it, you'll have a better walk with God. And you'll have a better walk with everyone else around you. I think it's critical to our spirituality. And if you take a look at Matthew chapter 22, verse 37, and so Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments." And so at the heart of our relationship with God is this command to love God with everything that we've got, and then to love each other. And I'm pretty sure you've heard it plenty of times that this love that they were talking about here is this agape love. And agape love has nothing to do primarily with our feelings, our emotions. Agape love is really based on a decision to always want the best in a godly way for everyone, right? And so in spite of our feelings, not that we don't have feelings, but in spite of every feeling that we have, whether it's good or bad or whatever, agape love is about a decision to love somebody, to want their best no matter what. And so with that in mind, there's always kind of in the picture, you see there's this battle that goes on between our emotions and our thoughts. Because a lot of times emotions will control what we think about, control our thoughts, and our thoughts control what we do. And so hopefully by looking at some of these tools, we'll begin to have something in a practical way to be able to increase our emotional intelligence and therefore, I believe, increase our walk with God. So let me move on to the point. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5, it says, "We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ." So we know that we're to take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. But how do we get there? All right. And this is the key thing that when I was doing this class and I was learning this in class. And this was the thing that stuck out to me the most. Feelings, emotions, and thoughts, they're not the same thing. They're not. They're totally separate. Feelings do not have an action to them. Thoughts do have an associated action. Now, sometimes things happen so quickly because our brains are wired that way. So sometimes we can think that our feelings and our thoughts are all the same thing, but they're not. They're not. And let me show you, we'll take a look at a couple examples here in just a second. In John, but emotional intelligence is a person's ability to understand their own emotions, the emotions of others, and to act appropriately using these emotions. Emotional intelligence never stops growing because we are always evolving as people. Emotional intelligence is something that must be nurtured. And that's a quote from Gahan. But you'll see this played out throughout the scriptures, Old Testament, New Testament, doesn't matter where you look at it. Once you understand emotional intelligence and you look for the things that we're going to take a look at as far as tools, you'll see it everywhere. And I'll give you two examples here. In John chapter 2, in verse 13, it says, when it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of cords and drove all from the temple courts, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. To those who sold doves, he said, get these out of here. Stop turning my Father's house into a market. His disciples remembered that it is written, zeal for your house will consume me. Amazing example of emotional intelligence here, because Jesus was the master. You can tell that he was upset, angry, but it was credited as zeal. And so his thoughts were in a right godly place, and he went in and he cleared out the temple. Perfect example here when we're talking about emotional intelligence, emotions leading to thoughts, which lead to action. Let's take a look at another example in John chapter 18. And in John chapter 18, we'll be in verse 2. This says here, now Judas, who betrayed him, knew the place because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas came to the garden, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and the Pharisees. They were carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, who is it you want? Jesus of Nazareth, they replied. I am he, Jesus said. And Judas, the traitor, was standing there with them. When Jesus said, I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground. Again, he asked them, who is it you want? Jesus of Nazareth, they said. Jesus answered, I told you that I am he. If you are looking for me, then let these men go. This happened so that the words he had spoken would be fulfilled. I have not lost one of those you gave me. Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Jesus commanded Peter, put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me? Then the detachment of soldiers with its commander and the Jewish officials arrested Jesus. And so here again, you see the master at work. And so you see the emotional intelligence of Jesus with the emotions dealing with its thoughts, again, dealing with its actions. But you also see a bad example when you take a look at Peter, who drew his weapon and cut off the guy's ear. And so you can see where one example of emotional intelligence was like, okay, this is God showing us how to do it. Peter, not so much. So what are emotions? Okay, emotions are impulses to act or react. Emotions, feelings, same thing. And you know the range of emotions, you can go from happy to furious, from joyful to depressed. There's a whole range of emotions. And, you know, I won't go into all of them, but there's a range and we know it. The key part, though, of emotions is what meaning you associate to the event. So what emotions or feelings come out of that, right? So something happens, it evokes an emotion. That emotion can get tied to a thought. And that association can be learned over time. I mean, it can be ingrained. It's just something that we have to realize that there is a separation of the two, right? And so they kind of give this acronym here, it's called PALM. And so you have this physical association, right? So how do you act when this happens? So a simple example, right? Somebody tells a joke, you hear it, you think it's funny, you laugh, okay? Those two things just happen like bam, bam. I mean, they're right together. Some of this stuff is so instantaneous, we think it's one, but it's not. And so the A part is attention. Okay, so that something happens, you have some kind of physical reaction to it, but then where do you put attention in your mind, right? L, language. What are you saying to yourself about what just happened? And then the M part is the meaning. What meaning are you associating to the event? What feeling, right? And so it takes time to break down the emotion, but the emotions happen so quickly, right? These are like split seconds. And so it's being able to slow that down to get this so ingrained that you begin to look at and see, okay, what just happened? How am I feeling about this? Let me break it down because I'm feeling something. I'm feeling some kind of way. Break it down. This is one of the tools that will help you to be able to do that. And so once you're doing that and you know, okay, I got to break this down. I'm feeling something before I move on, right? So I'm feeling something. And so, right, I can either just fall into my natural pattern of how I react, and I'm going to react based on all these different things that we just looked at. So let's break that down. And so I got to put mindfulness around my emotions, right? And so this is just a process, right? The first step in putting your mindfulness around your emotions is to be self-aware. You got to stop to know that, hey, look, I am feeling something here. I'm feeling something. And then once you recognize that, go into self-management mode. After that, it's all about motivation and resilience. Then you find empathy and then relationships. And those first three is about us. It's about you personally, right? Me being self-aware, me managing myself, me understanding my motivation and being resilient about it. And then the last two, the empathy and the relationships, that's what, after doing the first three, that's what comes out of it. And we'll take a look at that a little more here. So self-awareness, being aware of both your mood and your thoughts about your mood, right? So again, you got to slow it down here. And so again, another acronym, right? RULER is another one, right? So you got to recognize how you're feeling. You got to understand what that feeling is about. You got to label it. You got to understand, look, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm tired. You got to label that feeling. You got to make it clear to yourself. expressing, okay, this is it. This is where I am. And then you got to regulate. But that's being self-aware. And again, the more you kind of break this down, and some people are just like really good at this, but we can all get better. But it's really about slowing things down, because this happens so fast. These emotions, they happen so fast, and they lead to our thoughts, and then they lead to our actions. It's like, milliseconds that all this stuff happens. And so we learn how to slow it down in our heads. And so if you kind of see the pattern here, so once you get that, you get into the self-management mode. And so you say, okay, I'm going to control my thoughts, which will control my actions, right? So you got to realize what's happening. Okay, what's happening here? Why am I feeling this? What's going on with my feelings? What's happening? And you got to hit that pause button. You got to slow down. You got to slow down. That is one of the key things in really getting to the point of managing yourself. Slow down, learn the signs. We all have triggers. We know it. We know we can hear certain things. People can do something. They can hit that last nerve. You know it, but you got to see the signs. You got to know, wait a minute. And then whatever that story is, especially negative, you got to challenge it, and you got to say, no, wait a minute. I'm not going down that road. I know what's happening. Taking a break here. I know this is a trigger for me. I'm going to challenge that story that I'm hearing in my head. I'm not going to lash out. I'm not going to go down here not feeling. I'm not going to start getting all rude. I'm going to challenge that story. And I may have had these reactions and had these thoughts all my life, but I'm going to start challenging that story. Takes us back to that scripture. We're going to make every thought, we're going to make it obedient to Christ. Take a time out if you need to. Count, they say, you count to 10. Sometimes it's got to be 20. I mean, sometimes you just got to wait a minute. And you can talk about it in the third person. You can talk about, like, Ted, what are you about to do here? Sometimes you just got to detach from it and just kind of get an out-of-body experience and just look at yourself and just like, look, what's going on? What are you doing? And after you figure that out, then you get to the compassion and the empathy part. That's a big leap, but that's where you get to the agape. That's where you get to the spiritual side of loving God and loving one another. So handling our emotions, right? So we've got this motivation, this emotion that drives you. Okay, so like, why would I even want to do this? What am I feeling? Because I want to please God. I want to be more like Jesus. I want to show God that I'm grateful, right? So whatever that is, whatever that spiritual motivation is, you got to hang on to that, because why am I even going down this route? Why am I trying to do all this stuff? It's about God. It's about my relationship with God. I want to please my Father. I want to be more like Jesus. And that resilience is about, you got to keep going, even when things get tough, because this is not easy stuff. If it was easy, Jesus wouldn't have had to come here to do it. Nothing easy about this. But it does get easier the more you pay attention to it. It becomes more natural. It really does change things. So now you kind of got through this first part. So now, okay, I've slowed it down. I've thought about it. I've challenged those thoughts. I've gotten to the point now, I understand where I am. So now here comes the empathy, right? Because something generated this stuff, right? So the empathy comes with understanding the emotional perspective of other people. And there's three types. There's the cognitive empathy. So if I'm with somebody, I'm looking at it, I understand they're feeling something. It's not just me feeling something, they're feeling something. How are they feeling? That's where the empathy starts kicking in. I may be hurt, but how are you feeling? Why did this happen? What's going on? that emotional side of empathy. Okay, you're hurt, you're angry. I'm going to try and understand why and understand your emotional state. Not just that you're feeling something, but really come to like, okay, how am I going to see this from their perspective? What's going on? And then compassion comes in where, okay, let me do something about that. It's going to turn into some sort of action, right? And so if I'm being empathetic, all these things come into play, right? But I can only get there if I get my mind right first, right? Because if my mind's not right, if my emotions are not under control, if I'm not under self-management, I don't care what you're feeling. I'm feeling something and you better hear about it. Or it's all about me. But if you get to the empathy, then when you get to your relationships, then it's totally different because now you're a more empathetic person. You're in tune with what they're feeling, whether they're able to manage their emotions or not, but you're in tune. You're in tune with yourself. You're in tune with them. And so then when you have these discussions and these relationships, then you're listening to understand and not just to respond. Doesn't mean you won't respond, but you're not listening so that you can just say something back. You're really listening so you can understand where they're coming from. It changes everything. Everything, if you get to this point. I'm going to end up here. Emotional intelligence, kind of what we started off with in Matthew chapter 26. Let's go back here. Matthew 26. We'll be in verse 36. It says, then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, sit here while I go over there and pray. He took Peter and the two sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. Going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, my Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. Couldn't you men keep watch with me for 1 hour? He asked Peter. Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. He went away a second time and prayed, my Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done. When he came back, he again found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy. So he left them and went away once more and prayed the third time, saying the same thing. Then he returned to the disciples and said to them, are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour has come and the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer. A perfect example of the master showing us about emotional intelligence. It's perfect example. So it's really what it's all about. If Jesus didn't show it, I wouldn't be here talking to you. You wouldn't be here listening. We'd be in bad shape. There'd have to be some other plan, but this was the plan. But this is emotional intelligence, emotional intelligence. And so that's why I believe that the more we grow in this, it's how we grow spiritually. It's how we have a better relationship with our Father. It's how we have a better relationship with each other. We talk about it all the time in the squad. Whatever we're doing, no matter what it looks like, the bottom line is loving God, loving one another. That's what it's all about. Because as disciples, that's what it's all about, bottom line anyway. So again, I'm glad I got a chance to share it. I hope this helps. Again, this is just some tools. There's plenty of stuff online that you can go and look it up. Any questions, feel free to, reach out, but amen. Thanks so much.